There, friends on Facebook and YouTube. Welcome once again. Hopefully, it's a once again. Hopefully, you've been here before. But if not, and if it's your first time, welcome. This is the behind the scenes recording of the Self Employed Life podcast, which is kind of cool for you because you get to see the raw, unedited, who knows what's going to happen version before the podcast comes out, which is a good 6 to 8 weeks. I think this episode won't be broadcasting until the end of June. So you have a good 8 weeks or more advanced viewing or listening of this content, which is kind of cool. So we're glad you're here. With that, we are going to dive in and begin the show. You know, one way or another, all of business is about persuasion, persuading someone to choose you through your marketing, persuading someone to buy from you. Even relationship building in many ways is a form of persuasion. Does persuasion sound creepy to you? Well, we're going to find out, and we're going to learn 8 persuasion levers with Karen Grill, a business coach and certified persuasion strategist. Having started her first online business over 14 years ago, Karen knows the struggles of entrepreneurs and has created strategies to help businesses produce stellar results. She helps business owners unleash the power of persuasion to optimize their offers, their funnels, and emails so they can multiply their income and their impact. Welcome, Karen.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, as you know, I came across this idea of persuasion and I was immediately intrigued by it because, as a guy who wrote a book called Lingo,
Mhm.
I'm very interested in the power of words, and persuasion is one that we're going to talk about in a moment. But before we get started, though, I want you to explain to us what a persuasion strategist is. I have never heard that term before, but it's actually a certification process.
Yeah, so last year I went through a certification process. There's a persuasion school in the UK, and I went through the program. And it's really looking at, a lot of people think about the words that they use, but there's some psychological things beneath the words that we need to know as business owners and really be able to effectively describe what we do to people so that they would want to see us as a solution to their problems.
Yeah,
And so it's kind of going beneath the layers of just the words. And I think that's what's confusing for a lot of people. A lot of people think it's manipulation. And I would say there's a big difference between the two. So that persuasion is not something you do to somebody else, but something that happens to yourself due to outside stimuli. And manipulation is changing that. You're only in it for yourself, right? You want the sale no matter what. Like you'll sell a car to somebody, even if it's a lemon, even if it's not the right fit, you just want the sale. For persuasion is we're there to really serve our clients. And we just want to showcase our product or service in the best way possible so that that ideal client will see us as the solution.
Hmm. Yeah, and honestly, I agree. I mean, if you look at the portfolio of books on Amazon that use the word persuasion, it's usually not that any of them are wrong and some are very popular, but that they're usually geared towards the mind, right? Like you're trying to
Mhm.
persuade people's mind or the psychology. And this is a little bit more, as I take interpret your take on persuasion, it's more emotionally driven. It's more about customer behavior and customer psychology. So is that sort of the difference? Again, as I said in the intro, like, is persuasion creepy? No, but the difference is that it's moving people emotionally as a form of persuasion. And it's more
Mhm.
aligned with that goal.
Definitely. So, I mean, I know that you're big on really understanding your customers, right? And so that's kind of the persuasion that we want. We want to understand them on a deep level so that we can show how our service or product can help them. And, some people have, I think, used the word persuasion in the wrong way, and bad people will do bad things. And so they can take some of these ideas and use them in the wrong way. But I typically only work with authentic and, entrepreneurs who have integrity and who are, really want to help and serve their clients. And so that is the idea, is really to make sure we're understanding what that deep kind of emotion is and setting up our offers, our sales pages, our emails in that way so that they can see that we're the solution.
Yeah. One of the things I read that you've written that I think really applies to us self-employed business owners. And to me, it's a way of calling forth their commitment to their work and calling them to understand the power of persuasion. And you write that if you know your offers are transformative and you're the best kept secret, you must improve your persuasion skills. And I really agree with that, which honestly is why I wanted to have this conversation and to be able to teach our listeners the 8 levers, because I really do think if people get a better understanding and a better feeling of what persuasion is, that it's not manipulation, it's not conniving, that
Mhm.
it's actually a strategy to emotionally move people into what you truly believe is best for them, right? If you
Exactly.
believe your services or your product is best for them, you're kind of doing them a disservice to not persuade them towards what you have to offer. Is that how you feel about it?
Oh, I totally agree. And I mean, I think that the way you work with people too, you've probably seen people who are amazing at what they do, whether it's a career coach or mindset coach or accountant, whoever that is. But the way they present their offer is not compelling at all. No one will
Yeah.
know how amazing they are and how they can really change their life or their business. And so it's really helping, I think, self employed people tap into that to really understand their clients. But then how do you present it? It's not just words, but there's certain components you need in certain orders so that it's almost like you're taking them on a path, right? They need to see certain kind of ring certain bells along the way so that they know they're the right path, so that they get to the final thing and they'll see you that they want to hire you.
Yeah, and it's very true of the audience here on the Self-Employed Life because, first of all, our tagline is business with a soul. So
Right.
I very intentionally am calling forth business owners that do so with a sense of soul, with that are purpose-driven, heart-centered.
Mhm.
Uh, that audience also is far more likely to be soft in the way that they present themselves and lighter. And I always have to get a little bit of a chuckle when someone worries, and I understand it, but many of my coaching clients will express some degree of worrying about coming across too aggressive or coming across like they're, you know, email marketing too often. Well, our warriors are so heart centered. I was like, you are so far from that. You don't even have to worry about it. Like, it's usually I'm trying to encourage them to step into persuasion more so they can get the results they want. And I
Oh,
think
for
it's,
sure.
yeah, that's where I think persuasion is just so important.
Mhm. I think the same thing. I find a lot of heart-centered entrepreneurs are very timid. They don't really kind of embrace and they don't know how to show that, they have this special process or signature system that they use that really moves people from, point A to point B. They transform whatever product or service they have. But they're afraid to say that. They're afraid to really embrace what they
Yeah.
do and be able to show that. And it's not braggy, right? I'm not trying to be slimy or sleazy, but
Yeah.
again, if you really believe in your product or service, you should be wanting to tell everybody what you do and how you can help them.
Yeah, like I said, I really think if you really believe in what you do, and I trust that most people listening in do, you're actually doing a disservice to not change the world. Hey, I end this show every week with change the world, right? You're
Yep.
doing a disservice to not changing the world by letting people know what you have to offer. And I said 99.9% of the people I interact with are so far from becoming overly aggressive. It's pretty safe to say don't worry about it. Now, I want to also understand the difference between written persuasion and verbal persuasion because
Mhm,
at the surface it seems like we're talking about conversations, verbal conversations. But of
mhm,
course, those of us in business, so much of the persuasion we need to create is done in written form through our
mhm,
landing pages on our websites. It's brand messaging.
mhm.
So, what is there a difference then between how we persuade, whether it's written or verbal, or are the fundamentals the same?
So I would say the fundamentals are basically the same, but as you know, it's a little harder in the online world, in the written world, right? Because, obviously personalities can play a role in persuasion, the way you present yourself when you're talking with someone like on a Zoom call or something like this. But when it's just the written word, it's kind of flat. So we have to work even harder to be able to so people understand what we're offering. So there's a little bit more in terms of kind of grabbing attention, those kinds of things that we have to do right from the beginning because really nobody owes us their attention, right? We have to earn their attention. So first we have to grab it, but then we earn it line by line. So in written form, you have to work almost a little harder because people can hang on every word that you write. Whereas when you're talking, you can kind of go back and forth and there's exchanges, right? So in the written word, we actually have to work a little harder, though the fundamentals are basically the same.
Yeah, actually, you really just brought something else up that I hadn't thought about. Also video persuasion. A lot of us
Mhm.
need to market ourselves through video, and what I just realized is that there's monologue persuasion and dialogue persuasion. So
Mhm.
a verbal conversation, you have the advantage of it being a dialogue conversation, dialogue
Right.
persuasion, if you will, where both in written form and in video form, it's a monologue persuasion, right? Meaning
Mhm.
it's a one-way conversation. You're putting out either in word or in video, and somebody's receiving it. And the difference there is what you touched on, which is the metaphor I like to use is sort of like throwing a tennis ball against the wall. It never comes back as fast as you threw it,
Right.
right? So, in order to get your point of persuasion across in written form or in video, you actually have to throw it that much harder. There has to be
Mhm.
more hook, there has to be more energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, some people feel like, "Oh, Karen, I'm exaggerating too much. I'm over the top," especially if they're doing like a live video. But you have to because some of that, even in the video, gets lost. It kind of flattens or dampens kind of our enthusiasm. So you actually do have to do a little bit more. And in written form, you have to do even more because there's no other cues for people, right? It's just the words. There's no visual cues for them to, clue into. So I think it's so important that for like the monologue, as you described it, and the written form, we have to work harder. We have to do better as self-employed people.
Yeah, I think one of the differences I see as I work with my coaching clients and student of the Self-Employed Business Institute, as I work with them on their marketing materials, here's one of the examples I give is that in dialogue, right? It's a common practice. Think of a comedian. A comedian gives the
Mhm.
punchline at the end. But in a monologue marketing, when you're marketing, your punchline has to be at the top in order to get somebody to hook to even read the rest because they're just not going to hang in there long enough to get to the punchline if it's not so compelling at the top. So there's a difference between monologue and dialogue. Dialogue, punchline at the end. In monologue, you need to hook in the beginning. So often, what I tell my coaching clients to do is to write their marketing messaging in a way that becomes natural to them, and what's happening is usually we're processing as we're writing. Usually it's getting better and we're getting more and more to the point, and it ends great. And then I just tell them, terrific, reverse it. Take what's
I
at
love
the end, put it at the top, right? And it's a way of creating a bigger hook at the top because in monologue form, you have to in order to persuade, we have to start right at the top. Yeah.
Oh, I totally agree. And when you think about it, as you know, our attention spans have really gone down. And so if you're scrolling, let's say on Facebook, and there's a cat video and you talking, you really have to work hard to get that attention from someone away from the cat video and onto you and give them a reason to actually listen. You have to pique that curiosity. So they'll say, "Hey, what is she talking about?" If you just start like, "Hi, I'm Karen," you know, that's just not going to do it anymore, right? So we have to be really good, whether it's monologue, whether it's written form, we have to grab their attention.
Yeah, in my book, The Self-Employed Life, I present the Netflix test, I
Yes.
call it, and I explain that as Netflix has proven wrong that we have a less of an attention span, right?
Hmm.
I mean, scientists might say otherwise. Marketers love saying that we have a shorter attention span. I'm not sure that I even agree with it because I'm like, I don't know that we have a shorter attention span. It's just that I think we're much more particular about what we give our attention to because
Hmm.
Netflix has proven everything wrong because they grab our attention and keep it. So to me, the Netflix test is imagine being hooked on a Netflix show next to somebody and they come across what you're putting out in the world that's so good, they turn their laptop to the person next to them and say, "Hey, check this out. You literally were so interesting, you had interrupted somebody's Netflix viewing."
Uh-huh.
That's persuasion. If you could accomplish that, you've accomplished something, right?
Right. I
So
agree.
let's go
Yeah, go
through
ahead.
these 8 persuasion levers because we
Sure.
want to understand well, let's start with that. The 8 persuasion, is it, I would imagine this is not a case where we have to have all 8. Explain how, is this just, how do we work knowing these 8?
Hmm. So it depends a little bit on kind of what you're using it in. So, for instance, in an email sequence, you wouldn't use all levers in everyone, right? So there's a kind of combination of levers that work good. The first email, you have a lot about believability, right? Because people don't know who you are really yet. They need to know that you actually can do what you say you're going to do. So you kind of move them along. On a sales page, there's quite a lot of these that you're going to try to use. In social media posts, there's some of these that you're going to want to use on different days, on different ways, on different subjects. So definitely, if you just understand them, you'll kind of start to get a sense of which ones I need to use when.
I think I love the point you made about email because, again, like you said, it may not be a single email, but this is an invitation to build a relationship with those folks on your email list by kind of providing one or two of the persuasion levers each time, right? So you're first gaining their believability and et cetera, et cetera. All right. So number one of the eight, number one is believability. So tell us about that.
Sure. So I'm sure you've all seen kind of things that are say, oh, as seen on Forbes or other things, like you have a lot of those as well. You've been in TEDx. So using kind of credentials, your knowledge, experience, maybe you've gone to certain universities, those things can show that you have the knowledge, skills, and ability. And also having a great introduction kind of really can draw people in. They believe that you do what you say you can do, or that your program or product or service can actually do what it says. But there's a part of believability that most people miss. And it's not only that they have to believe in you, but they have to believe in themselves that they can get the same results as you've gotten for other people. And this is what most people miss. A lot of people, splash their credentials on their sales pages and things, and that's great because that is one part of it. But you also need to make that connection with that ideal client, that they believe that they can get the result. And we can do some of that through sometimes testimonials or case studies. You need to be really careful, though, that it's for a testimonial for that ideal client, that they have those same things. So previously, I worked a lot with mom entrepreneurs, so I really understood them. And in my testimonials, I made sure I chose someone who was a mom, who had little kids, who didn't have the time, was trying to run this business, so that my ideal clients could identify with that person, right? They could believe, oh, she has the credentials, but she's also helped someone just like me,
Just
and
like
I can
me.
get that same
Yeah.
result.
And that's the key, just like me. And it's a couple of weeks ago, we broadcast an episode with my editor, AJ Harper. And AJ is super strict as we write our books, we being her community of authors, that what we offer in the book is doable. Right. And the
Mhm.
same idea. It's like, no matter what level you're at, it doesn't do your reader or your audience any good for you to be putting out things that they don't believe is doable for themselves.
Right.
So I love that. And I think doing so through testimonials is a brilliant idea. Number two is distinguisher. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So people, when they have a product or service, there's a minimum level that you have to meet, right? So like if you're a telephone service, your cell phone service, you have to connect the phones. They have to be able to speak to one another, right? If you're a pizza person, you have to have pizza that you actually is edible. So that's the minimum level. But then we have to look at, okay, what makes my pizza place different from every other pizza place? You have to really look at that unique selling proposition that they talk about, and how you're different from everyone else and why that's important. Why should this ideal client, customer care that you're different? If I can share a story, I worked with a local pizza place and they didn't believe in social media. They said, it doesn't work. And when I looked, they just put coupons up every day, right? And I said, well, no, that doesn't work, but let's try something. So we started to talk about, oh, they use a certain organic tomatoes for their pizza sauce. So we talked about that. And then they had a gluten-free crust. So we talked about that. But the thing that got the most reaction was we talked about how outside, I mean, literally a sidewalk with two tables, and they had a mat with a water bowl and dog biscuits. That connected with people. And that's what I was trying to share, is that we have to create these touch points above and beyond the pizza. Why would people want to be interested in you? What are things that you can really connect with people? And so it was organic tomatoes, right? Gluten-free crust, and then dog lovers love pizza too. So that really connected with them above and beyond the service, the minimum level service providing pizza that you do. So trying to find those other ways that you can distinguish your pizza place or service or coaching business from everybody else.
Yeah, the key is, I believe, for people to know what makes them different, and that's part of the coaching work to do. I mean, this is how I spend a great deal of my time helping people
Mhm.
find, because it's there, it's in their story, it's in the connection of dots of their past. But a lot of people struggle with even finding what makes them different. And to your dog story, this is how brilliant of marketing that is. I would imagine most people, dogs are like mine. My dog knows every business in Miami where he can get a free treat.
Yep.
So when we walk by, he's pulling to go into that place. And every time he does, it's a recurring memory for me of going there. And it
Mhm.
reminds me, oh, we haven't been to that restaurant or that cafe in a while, because he knows every single place that he can get a free treat. So
I love
dogs are
that.
great marketers. And number three is curiosity.
So we touched on this a little bit, right? That there's so much information. We're really information overload. And so, in order to make people want to read our things, we have to make them curious. So, a lot of times, asking that question first can be really helpful because in our brains, a lot of people, when we see an open-ended statement or a question, our brain wants to fill that in, right? They want an answer to a question. So a lot of times, if you do have a question as kind of your headline or your in your email subject line, that can really get people to say, I want to know the answer to that. So again, I think as self-employed people, we have to work harder to make sure we're piquing that curiosity in people. And especially we want it to pique it in our ideal buyers, right? The people that we want to work with, not just everybody. So we really need to understand them. And so, knowing what would make them want to say, like, click more or open the email is what we as self-employed people have to worry about.
Yeah, and I think, that's why something disruptive works so well because it makes us curious. Now, I don't want to say that everybody should do something disruptive because I think it can be a little overdone, but that's why it works. It works because, like, well, I hadn't heard that thought before, and I'm immediately curious about it. Number 4 is status.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of people skip this. I think most people focus on, oh, I want to save people money. But money is not the most important motivator for a lot of people and a lot of business owners. A lot of people want to feel like, they're elevating their status in some way. They want to feel kind of better about themselves, like somehow they're up leveled, right? So as business owners, maybe if you're working with newbie people who are just starting their business, they want to get to that point where they have a team of people working for them. They're not working 60 hours a week, right? There's something about that. They want to feel like I've arrived at whatever that is for them. And so if we can really think about what is that our ideal buyer is really striving for, not just the money, right? Maybe it's more time, but maybe it's like just them feeling like they're a successful business owner. So, there are reasons that people buy, Teslas or Maseratis or whatever that is. There's some kind of status level. And we need to think about that as business owners. What is that for our ideal client? And how can we show them that by using, our product or service, they can achieve that?
Yeah, and I think it's you made a strong point that status is not always a material good either. It's
Mhm.
I'm speaking at an event shortly that when I spoke to the event planner here, I assumed I was being hired as a speaker to help the audience grow their business because typically, and
Yeah.
she's like, you know what? We don't really need, the audience doesn't really need more. What they need is to figure out, can you help us figure out how to manage this crazy self-employed life? Like, do you have a talk about that? I was like, yes, I do. Right. Because so that was the status. The status was, their goal was not to achieve more business, but rather status to them would be free time.
Mhm.
With the goal, their next goal of status is, can I have this successful business that I have and it's running? Can I have that and take a vacation? That's the status. Okay. So the next one is relatability. So tell us about that.
Mhm. So typically, people like to be able to relate to someone that they're going to be buying from, especially if it's more kind of intimate in terms of like one on one coaching or something, or maybe small group coaching. And they really want to know that they can relate to this person. And there are some brands that do well, kind of having an elevated, they're kind of distant from their customers. And, you can think of really high level brands. But I would suggest for the average kind of self employed person, you want to have some kind of relatability with them. So maybe you're a couple steps ahead of them in terms of the journey and you're helping people who are just starting out, right? You don't always want to show that everything's running smoothly, like everything's ticking like clockwork. You do want to show some of that behind the scenes. Now, I'm not saying, show your biggest mistake ever or something like that. But there are ways I think that we can start to draw people in to show that, we understand those struggles that they're going through. We went through that. We have these situations. Not everything we do is perfect. And they want to see us kind of as human as well. You don't want to have a situation where you're kind of unreachable. Like they'll think they don't understand me, right? They won't understand. They won't be able to help me because my business is different or my life is different. You want to make sure that they see that you're a normal person just like them.
Yeah, really important. The next, when it comes to persuasion, is often used a little too often. It works for persuasion, but something to know about, and that's urgency.
Right. So this is somewhat of a controversial one because I unfortunately people have used it in kind of an artificial way. They
Mhm.
create this fake urgency that's not real. Um, but I also think then as a result, a lot of service providers has shied away from urgency. So I think there's a way to do it. urgency with integrity, right? So if you're, let's say, a coach and you have one-on-one clients, I mean, there's a limit to the amount of clients you can take just inherently because of the amount of time you have. So there's some urgency built in there. I never want someone to say that, a launch or something is ending when it's not. Like, I want you to be, truthful about that. I think honesty is so important, and you will gain more clients being honest than kind of faking things. But you need to help people decide, make the decision, right? We have to prompt people sometimes. Otherwise, they'll just stay. We know that people will procrastinate forever on something. They'll never take action. And so again, if you think your service can help somebody, you want to make sure you're helping them make the decision. Now, the decision could be not to work with you, right? And you have to be prepared for that. Or maybe they'll work with somebody else, but at least you're kind of prompting them to make the decision. So there are ways that you can do urgency. Maybe you're having a cohort starting soon, and so there's a deadline for that. And again, that kind of urgency, I think, is authentic. And it also, again, helps that person try to make that decision right then. And maybe it's not to work with you, but maybe it is.
Yeah, and there's also emotional urgency. I think it is a bit trite when it comes to coaching, but it makes a valid point, which is, and what will happen if you don't take action
Yeah.
now? I mean, there is
Mhm.
a sense of urgency. Sometimes as coaches, we have to point that out. It's like, well, and what's the option?
Mhm.
You need to do X, Y, Z. What are the consequences if you don't? So there's
Right.
an emotional urgency too that I think we sometimes need to point out.
Yes.
Number 7 is reciprocity.
So you will see, I think some people, service providers, understand this and some don't. So some people kind of try to hide some of their information or save it only for their clients, and they're not generous in kind of the information they give. But again, I think you'll see that the more you give, the more likely somebody wants to feel like they want to give back to you. So whether you offer a free live stream and are giving some tips to them, they'll more likely to sign up or to watch it and then want to learn more about you. And I also just think I believe in abundance, right? So I really believe that the more we give, the more we're going to get back. And even if, so I'm sharing 8 levers here. I could have saved this and not shared this, right? But I think by sharing this, I know that there are some people who will probably never hire me. If they can take this and use this in their business, I feel like that's a win. There are going to be some people who say, "Oh, I can take this and I think I can do it, but I might have some questions, so maybe I do need to work with you." Right? So, I really feel like we can give all the information and people will still want to hire us. So, again, give as much as you can. People will reciprocate. The right people will reciprocate.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen a lot of my clients kind of sit on the fence and try to figure out, well, how much is too much to give. Sometimes they're fearful of their IP being stolen, so they keep things so close to their chest. It's like, except the world doesn't know about it. Like, I mean, it's either holding them back from launching or speaking up in a bigger way because they're so fearful of their IP being stolen. I'm like, but really good IP that nobody knows about isn't helping either. So I think, I definitely favor giving a lot away. Like I said, you could have said, all right, there's 8, but we're going to give you 4. And if you want the other 4, go here.
Mhm.
In the end, that winds up creating distrust, where if you
Mhm.
just give the information, I think the key is what you touched on, which is so often we can give someone all the best of the information that we can. But at the end of the day, you realize that what they really need is help doing it. And that often is something that can't be communicated in written form. Or, I mean, honestly and transparently, it's why I started the Self-Employed Business Institute, because after there was no long range plan for that, after I wrote the book, I was like, great. I gave a lot of information in a book that people are loving. I'm getting great feedback. And now everybody's asking me, how do I do that? How do I create a hug marketing journey? What's the structure of that? And I realized you just can't write that out in written form. It would be a series of encyclopedias. It's based on 38 years of experience. So, but I can teach it, right?
Right.
So that is often the case, I think, a lot of times. So don't look at it as, you know, that you're giving a loss leader, right? Instead, give what you can, but recognize that in most cases, people need more support, accountability, or they actually need more information. Okay, so the last, which I love that you end with, is levity.
Yes. So I'm sure you work with a lot of business owners too who are really good at what they do, but they kind of just present the facts like, I do this, these are the things, that I cover. there's nothing that really grabs your attention, right? We also want to make sure it's kind of edutaining, right? So we're entertaining and educating at the same time. Again, part of that is just people are busy and they're overwhelmed. We need to grab their attention, but we want some material that is educational and maybe kind of just to the point, but we want some fun things too. And again, that's kind of that idea of behind the scenes, making you seem more human so that they can relate to you. And I think knowing kind of your superpower, which I kind of view as kind of some of the soft skills that you have, so that you can show your personality, because people are attracted to different personalities. No, so not everyone's going to like me, and that's fine. But the people who like my style, will then pay attention. And so that's really what we want. So I hope that people will kind of embrace that. I sometimes think on some, websites and emails, it's a little dry. It's not super exciting or entertaining. And I think we can do a little bit better as business owners.
Yeah. And so again, let me just quickly review the
Mhm.
8 levers of persuasion. Again, using some of these, all of these, depending how you're doing it, but just knowing that these are you could say 8 emotional drivers that encourages someone in the direction that you want them to go. You're trying to persuade them in a direction,
Mhm.
whether it is to choose you, to buy from you, to continue a relationship with you. But persuasion overall is you're trying to persuade somebody in a direction. And any combination of these 8 levers will do it. And they are believability, distinguisher, curiosity, status, relatability, urgency, reciprocity, and levity. Love it. Great stuff, Karen. I really appreciate it. Like I said, I was immediately fascinated with the idea of persuasion. One of the most grounding and wonderful, I'll say, bits of advice, although it came in a form of a book, but that's the power of books. And I often give this out as when people ask me, what are your top books that have influenced you? I often say To Sell is Human with Dan Pink. And the
Mhm.
reason for that is because he created such a shift in there around my mindset about sales. Gosh, I have to look up when that book was written. It's been so long. It's been a long time since that book was written, but it reframed how I felt about sales in a way that I had always been waiting for somebody to put words to. And the way he described it is, at the end of the day, all sales is about emotionally moving people.
Yep.
And I even took it even a step further in my own mind. I said, actually, it's just all about moving people. Really, what you're trying to do is emotionally move people. That's what persuasion is.
Mhm.
Emotionally move them, to move them where you believe you can serve them.
Right.
And you have to help people move. We have to help people with persuasion to move.
I agree. That's great.
Awesome. Before I let you go, we're going to do the rapid round around the acronym of SELF. The S in SELF stands for sustainability. What's one daily habit you have that sustains you?
So I have a gratitude practice. So first thing in the morning, I write down the things that I'm grateful for. And then at the end of the day, I write down my wins. I've really found that we need to train our brains to look for wins. Even on a horrible day, you have to find something that you can consider a win so that your brain will continue to look for those.
I also love that you're doing something in the morning and at night. I'm such a morning routine person, but has really recently come into my own sphere, partly due to Marshall Goldsmith and his book, The Earned Life, and a practice he has. I definitely need to work on an evening practice, because I think that kind of bookends it, where you start
Mhm.
off with a gratitude practice and you look at your wins at the end of the day. I think that's we know that scientifically that really works on the brain. It's a good thing to do. The E in self stands for elevate. What's one thing that you would love to see us do to elevate our business?
So I would love it if you go and look at one thing in your business, whether it's an email subject line or a social media post. Go check it out and think, can I do this better? Is there a better hook, a better way that I can say that? Take one, make one change and see what results you get.
Awesome. And the L in self stands for let's go. What's one action step you would suggest we take even today?
So today, I want you to try to use one of the levers that we covered today, whether it's on your sales page, your emails, a social media post, or maybe even just talking with someone. Try to use them and start to see different ways that you can use them in your business.
Yeah, I think I actually don't remember if this is to sell as human or if it's just something I took from it, but I think it was in the book. Just everybody's selling something, right? Parents are trying to persuade their kids to eat vegetables. Right.
Yeah.
So maybe that's your action step today. You can use any one of these levers and see if you can actually convince your child to eat broccoli.
There you go.
Right.
I love it.
So there you go. Great training. The F in self stands for facing a challenge. With all that you've accomplished, what's one challenge you still face?
So I think it's a daily thing to make sure that I'm having kind of the balance in terms of my business and finding that time for myself and my family. Some days I do great, and some days are a challenge. New things come up all the time. We're tested all the time. So it's really making sure I'm grounding myself and staying true to kind of my values and what I see as important in life.
I love that. Well, Karen, I am just thrilled to know there's such a thing out there in the world as persuasion strategist. It's a very hireable uh, thing, you know? I mean, I love that that exists as a brand new term to me. I didn't know there was a certification process for it. But I tell you what, I mean, you know, for business owners that want to improve their sales, they want to improve their response they get in marketing, you're in the business of persuasion. I think hiring a persuasion strategist, it just makes perfect sense. And no, this is not a pitch to hire you. But I just am so intrigued by the idea that such a thing exists, and I really think it's a very smart strategic move for our business owners. But what a great way for you to position yourself. I really I love it. So, Karen, tell us what's the best way to find out more about you and your work.
So I'm quite active on LinkedIn. I'd love to see you there at Karen Grell, and I have KarenGrell.com as well. So I would love to meet any new people.
And by the way, we met on LinkedIn.
Yes, we did.
LinkedIn is where it's at, people.
Yep.
You meet really good people. Of course, we'll make sure those links are available in our show notes at jeffreyshaw.com/podcast. And if you are listening to this podcast in its traditional form, we love that. We have an 8-year history and 800 episodes out there in the world. But also know that you can now watch the live stream of our conversations 6 to 8 weeks in advance. If you hop on over and subscribe to my YouTube channel, you can be in click on that little bell so you get notification. You'll know whenever we go with live stream, and you get first dibs on these wonderful conversations. So you can find me on YouTube as well. Again, Karen, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey.
Remember, you might be in business for yourself, but you're not in business by yourself. Be your best self, be proud, and keep changing the world.